All right, we are back. It is week 6 recap and 31-27. The Colts over the Cardinals. They definitely have had prettier days in 2025, but 5-1 is that's a good looking record to say the least here. Going into a game that I can't wait for coming up on Sunday out in LA. Colts and Chargers here in week 7, but certainly a ton to get to from yesterday's performance at Lucas Oil Stadium, and really the work started more around 11 a.m. in terms of the news cycle for the Colts. So we'll recap all of that. Unfortunately, guest-wise, or I should say sidekick-wise, just be myself probably for both pods this week, unfortunately. Eddie Garrison, Mark Dykton, both on vacation. Even my brother-in-law, who's pinch hit at some times, Ross Lubbers, who does a great job, on vacation as well. Fall break time here in central Indiana, so I think a lot of people are getting that out of the way. So, again, we'll get to what I liked, what I didn't like here for today's podcast. A couple Twitter questions, and then we'll come back at you Wednesday afternoon previewing the Chargers. I'll just start overall, and again, probably your ugliest game of the season, certainly defensively. It's kind of wild. The offense had some lulls, and yet they still score a season-high 27 points. I said it last Monday. I'll say it again. Red zone. Red zone, red zone, red zone. 4 of 4 yesterday, the Colts. Arizona, 3 of 6. I mean, right there. In a 4-point game, if one of those is flipped. Either way. If Arizona has 1-3 that becomes a 7, or, obviously the final drive of the game, and then, one of those Colts drives ends in a Michael Badgley field goal, all of a sudden, that's the difference in the game. So, that to me is, if you want to boil it down to just kind of one thing, that would be it. And, some of this is just kind of surviving life in the NFL. And it was ended up being the biggest favorite you wore in the Shane Steichen era. And defensively, obviously, you have a ton of work. But, games are clunky. Watching it kind of a little bit of like the IU Iowa feel for our local audience out there from a few weeks ago. And, when the Colts were down entering the 4th, I thought that was a really good barometer for this team. Okay, this is something different. You're down 7. How do you respond? You're down 3. How do you respond? And yeah, you probably I don't know. Could they have thrown the flag there at the end? I'm sure they could have. Probably would have been more holding with Brissett still in the pocket than defensive pass interference. So pretty simple. If that's your team, having Trey McBride as your tight end, you want the flag thrown. If it's not, you want them to let them play. So that's probably the difference in the game, frankly, when it comes down to it. That would have put it 1st and goal to 1, or certainly would have given them a first down at that standpoint. So let's get into what I liked. I guess we'll save the pregame stuff for probably what I didn't like, but I'll start with the resolve from Daniel Jones. Jones, and first off, a credit to him. It took 22 quarters, if my math is right, 5.5 games for me to utter a phrase with Daniel Jones. What was that? And that was the first interception. It was a great play by Mack Wilson and going up and climbing the ladder to get it. But still, Mo Alley Cox was definitely open on that play, and it just uncharacteristic with no pressure in his face to make that throw, make that decision, I guess. Probably more the throw than the decision itself. Budda Baker certainly could have had him, later in the game. The offense had one of their rare lulls where it was I think it was 2 straight 3-and-outs there in the second, and then the pick, I believe, was after that. I mean, that is super odd for this Colts offense. And again, Arizona is a very good defense. So I was curious when that 4th quarter started, how would Daniel Jones respond? And I thought he hung in there under duress, under pressure, and delivered some big-time throws. When you're down 7, he started off that drive with the scramble. Then he hits Alec Pierce in that window, and if you go back and watch that throw, the throw's a little behind Pierce. I don't think he could have placed it any better. I think the ball had to be there. And if I remember correctly, that was still kind of a 2nd and long. And then later in the drive, after kind of the velocity tight window throw to Pierce, he lofts that one to Downs in the back of the end zone. Boom, tie game. So 2 different types of throws. Does that. Then you're down 3, takes a hit, hits Pierce for that 23, 24 yarder. And then the 3rd down to Josh Downs again, that came right after he had missed Downs high. I think that was his only miss in the 4th quarter from an incompletion standpoint. And this to me just shows something different. and more from Daniel Jones. You're down in the fourth quarter. You haven't had the cleanest game so far. How do you deliver in those moments? Under pressure, taking hits, stays in the pocket, not to Warren, not to Pittman, Pierce, downs. Just some big time plays from Daniel Jones. So I definitely wanted to make sure that we started there. Obviously, the red zone, to be 4 of 4. Again, I don't think I was overly concerned with the red zone early in the year. I think Tyler Warren, A, is such a weapon. B, you figured they'd run it a little bit better with Taylor eventually, and then the penalties would go away or at least quiet down, and that has definitely happened. For my next thing that I liked, I'll go with Josh Downs. And I know maybe from the statistical number, 6 for 42, 6 catches, 42 yards, and a touchdown. It's not like the craziest day in the world, but he just has such a knack for getting open, eyes in the back of his head, great feel. And he's obviously comes from a family of football players, so there's something probably innate with that. But his ability not to just settle after the catch and, whatever, go down. And I mean, there is a yard after catch element to him. It might be subtle. It might be, 2-3 yards, but those are so important when you're throwing short of the sticks. He obviously had the 3rd and 12 the previous week, but then to do that several times, I thought on Sunday, was just huge from him. And him and Warren are just such a great pairing on 3rd down, and kind of you can pick and choose where you're going. So a quieter day for Pittman. I don't think Pierce had a catch till the fourth quarter. I thought Arizona ran with him down the field better than I've seen some teams do as well. You need some others to step up, and I thought Downs did that for you. And then lastly, in what I liked, I'm a little shocked I'm mentioning a defensive player. I'm a little shocked that I'm mentioning this player. When you think about where the Colts are at right now from a defensive standpoint, and we'll get to the defense as a whole, I would say one of the guys that I have had, a very quiet start to the season in a contract year, but I felt his presence yesterday, was Kwity Paye. It's pretty rare for defensive linemen. Let me look at the box score here. I want to say it was 7 tackles for him, maybe even 8. 7. So 3rd on the team in tackles. That is, you almost never see that from a defensive lineman. And then he had 2 sacks. Now the second sack was just real effort. Jacoby's trying to scramble on that 3rd and goal there late, and he makes a play where he just stays active, him and Buckner, and getting that. I think it was a no-gain sack, but it was just needed at that moment. Not that Jacoby would have scrambled, but even if he gets a couple yards there, maybe it opens up a little bit more of the playbook, or maybe they do something different with McBride in that moment there. So I thought that was a really big play from Kwity there, and overall on a day when your defense certainly struggled as a whole, that I thought was much needed for him, especially with the season that he's had so far. All right, things I didn't like, I think you have to just go with the entire defensive operation. And I get that the Travaris Ward situation probably led to the Colts playing more zone. I would assume that. But, every level of the unit right now, I think you have various questions. And, really injury-wise, you're only injured at corner. Everybody else is pretty darn healthy, if not all the way healthy. And yet you allowed a team with their backup quarterback, down their top 2 running backs, and no Marvin Harrison Jr. for the second half, score season high in points. I think their final 6 drives all reached scoring position. They were, I believe, 120 yards over their average on the year. And like at one point on that final drive, I thought to myself, do you let them score? I mean, that's how bad the defense was playing. And I'm usually not a very, let them score sort of thinker there. But that's kind of where I was at with this defense. And, D-line right now, okay, where's the edge pressure? Are you feeling the defensive ends? And I get Kwity had, a little bit more of an impact, but still the true edge rushes, I just don't feel it. Linebacker, I know Jermaine Pratt led you in tackles yesterday, and they stopped rotating. It was really all Pratt next to Franklin, but I still don't feel great about that group. And then obviously corner, it's probably a little bit more injury related just with the overall depth there. So again, I thought just a really disappointing day. Jacoby Brissett is not a quarterback that should be throwing for 320 yards, or hell, he entered the fourth quarter, I think, like 220, which was higher than anything Kyler Murray had thrown for all year. And that was with, again, Marvin Harrison Jr. I actually thought he got better as the game moved along there, especially in that second half. And I don't know if Fox showed it. I did think it was kind of a cool scene with Brissett post-game. Took a picture with Kenny Moore II and David Thornton, the Colts player development guy. And yeah, I can only imagine how much that game probably meant for him. 30 starts here. And not that the Colts did him wrong. I don't want to infer that, but I just think as a competitor, that would mean a ton. His first start in about a year, you get this opportunity. He's got some of his former, teammates either at the game or certainly on that sideline, and to get all the way down there and to stop short, and a play that I think probably could have been flagged. To have it end like that, I thought probably had to be just excruciating for him. I would say my biggest defensive issue from yesterday was just the long downs and distances, the long distances allowed. 3rd and 15, first down. 3rd and 17, first down. 2nd and 15, first down. 2nd and 16, first down. That's what falls in the inexcusable category. And again, I fully acknowledge it was probably a pretty chaotic final hour before the game and trying to get a guy like Jonathan Edwards, more up to speed. Excuse me, I don't think they had, they obviously didn't feel comfortable going with that shadow versus what they probably would have felt with from a Mooney Ward point of view here. So defensive questions definitely there, as you're about to face, I think you're going to face better, if not more, just competent, proven quarterbacks. I think that's undoubtedly true, especially once you get past Cam Ward. But I think if you look at the quarterbacks remaining in the season, there is a level of just, again, more proven ability, more competence, however you want to describe it, going forward with this roster. Obviously, we got to mention the injuries, and just insane. I don't think I've ever typed that much pregame. And also, one more thing defensively, that Zaire Franco unnecessary roughness, just so boneheaded. I mean, you're staring at 3rd and 10, just so boneheaded. And then boom, Arizona now in midfield. I thought that ignited an Arizona drive there as the Colts finally got them into a 3rd and long. I cannot believe the Colts played a 60-minute football game yesterday. Did not have one in-game injury announced. I mean, that's pretty rare. I'd say over the course of the season, you probably have that happen twice. No injury announced during the game for any Colt player. And yet 2 dudes get hurt in warm-ups. Just crazy. I thought I was hearing things or seeing things. So let's start with Richardson. By all accounts, doing some sort of elastic band resistance thing. And, we've seen these quarterbacks work out. I've seen him do band work before. I guess it snapped, and, certainly the ricochet could lead. I could see this happen. I'm not, stunned by the nature of the injury. It's more of just can you believe that, actually happened to him of all people, given his injury history. So, we'll see what the eye orbital fracture is from a recovery time. I would think you might need to do the quarterback tryout here on this Monday like you did the kicker tryout last week. And, the list isn't great. Do you trade for a quarterback? Are you saying to yourself, hey, we can't afford to give up a day 3 pick when we've already given up a day 3 pick for Mekhi Blackman, and, maybe we need to save that pick for a defensive acquisition? No, we'll go free agent pool. Or do you say, well, Daniel Jones' injury history, look at the free agent pool. It's not great. If you're looking for connections in the free agent pool, Desmond Ridder they did have back in June. You could go there. I mean, he was only here for 3 days, so I don't want to overreact to that. C.J. Beathard is with Jim Bob Cooter in Jacksonville. There is a connection. Taylor Heineke is not direct, but, he obviously played in the NFC East, and certainly Chris Ballard probably, unfortunately, remembers those games that he came and I think he won both the starts, if I'm not mistaken, with Washington and Atlanta. So, even if you're in the camp of with this Richardson thing, I was done with him, I'm done with him. Okay, fine. You still have lost your backup quarterback for some amount of time. And as much as, I want to give Riley Leonard a hug for the effort he showed being Notre Dame's quarterback and, putting it on the line, I don't think he's ready for an NFL Sunday, especially as a pocket passer and as a thrower. So that is obviously a news item to watch. As far as Charvarius Ward, it's kind of wild, and Andrew Chernoff from Wish TV can vouch for this, but for those that don't know, I do local TV every Sunday on the field at Lucas Oil before games. So, I get down on the field, 11:15 probably. My hits are like 11:35, 11:45. And our cameras are set up in front of the visiting team on that side of the field. And I'm always reminded, and this week I was especially because I was paying attention to, okay, Jacoby's working out the wideouts. It looks like he's going to start. Kyler Murray was actually doing some stuff, but clearly wasn't playing. And I said to Andrew, I'm like, man, the field is so crowded right now. Like, if you get to an NFL stadium, and I don't know what time gates open, but if you get in there like 90 minutes to 2 hours before a game, that's when it's the most crowded on the field. You have all these position groups working out. You have the inactive guys typically working out as well. Arizona signed a new punter for last week. He is working out, obviously pregame. So you only have half the field, and it is, again, just pretty crowded. But when the Charvarius Ward injury happens, there's like nobody left on the field. It's literally like him and Drew Ogletree, and that is it. And that's what makes it just even more like, holy bleep, did that actually happen? And, helmets are off and Ward's backpedaling. I know Fox showed the replay of it, and, Ogletree's just kind of doing his own thing, throwing at the staff member, and boom, the 260-pound tight end hits him. It's a freak thing. So, yeah, we'll obviously see what happens with Ward. 2 concussions now in 5 or 6 weeks, and he means so much to this football team. You clearly saw that on Sunday, and with the Chargers upcoming, he obviously would matter a ton to facing Justin Herbert and whatever that wideout group looks like for the Chargers. And my full expectation was he was going to shadow Marvin Harrison Jr. So now it's obviously his injury situation. Is Kenny Moore back this week? This will be game number 4. Well, if he was going to miss 4 weeks, wouldn't you have put him on IR? He did do some lateral field work. We were out there. I think it was the Friday practice. Maybe it was the Thursday practice. I think it was Friday, though. So, maybe he is somewhat closer, but still, it's an Achilles thing. We'll have to wait and see on that. They signed Cameron Webster from the Browns, who had played I think a little bit this season, 4 starts in his career, former 5th-round pick, and he actually got in for a couple snaps on Sunday. So, corner-wise, it's more depth. I still think when Jalen Jones is healthy, and I thought there was a chance sometime in October he could get back, that, he could be the guy to, get more of a try, even though Louis Anarumo didn't seem to be the biggest fan of him during the offseason. So some definite questions, with quarterback in your backup spot right now, and then that corner, what do you do? Because, I could talk myself into a trade. I know we got a lot of trade questions we'll probably get to here in Twitter questions, but, I could talk myself into a trade at every level of the defense. I think that's kind of where you're at right now with that unit here. Okay, let's transition to Twitter questions. This is from Ryan from Chicago. Greetings, KB. Great win. I keep watching the Colts struggle, though, to have that bendy speed rusher around the edge. They do get pressure, but it always seems to be stunts or covered sacks. Does Latu or anyone on the roster have that pure speed rush? I think with Grover and DeForest Buckner in the middle, the edge rusher should be more effective. But then again, I'm not an X's and O's guy, just a fan. Great work, as always, on the pod. Thank you, Ryan, for that. And I could not endorse this question more. Yeah, I don't think they have that bendy speed rush skill set. At least it doesn't feel that way. And it should be beneficial to your interior guys. If you had that, push that quarterback up into the pocket to Buckner, Grover, whoever, even Adetomiwa Adebawore, I've noticed a little bit more here in recent weeks. That should be a recipe for great success. And I do feel like even the pay sack yesterday was a stunt. And, if you watch, I think when Daniel Jones got sacked on the other end of the field there early on in the game, Gonzalez gets beat, and then Baron Browning just whips Bernard Ryman on the other side. It's like, man, those individual rushers, I just don't see that as often with the Colts, and they've invested so much into that line. Like, that to me, it just kind of adds to the frustration that you have there. And look, I thought Kwity Paye had a good game, but you talk about bendy speed rushers, not really his game. Not Tyquan Lewis, not Samson Ebukam coming off an Achilles, and I'm pretty sure JT Tuimoloau was a healthy scratch again on Sunday. So, yeah, I think you're spot on there, Ryan, with that. This from Matt: should the Colts cut Drew Ogletree for the pregame incident with Mooney Ward? Matt, no. This question never crossed my mind. No. I'm very confused why. I mean, it's just a freak accident. Cut him because he ran into a dude and he outweighs him by 50, 60 pounds? I mean, I don't... Should Drew Ogletree maybe have gotten his head around quicker and looked... I don't want... Again, like, you see guys work out on the field all the time before the games. I just chalk it up to a freak accident. This is not... Don't overthink it. No, Drew Ogletree, I feel bad for him. That, like, people even think this. No, that's ludicrous. From Jordan, do you think Anthony Richardson's injury will land him on IR? I did kind of the Twitter doctor orbital fracture, and, obviously you've seen this in basketball a lot. Guys wear masks typically coming back from it. I don't know if a Rip Hamilton mask is needed for Anthony Richardson, but, that is something that you see varying degrees, I think, first off, on how much time guys miss. So your first question will be, A, how much time is he going to miss? B, are you comfortable with Riley Leonard as the backup? I don't think you are right now. And, like, you can't ignore the Daniel Jones, injury history here. So that would be something that I would think about. And again, the list of, Jeff Driscoll's and, John Wolford and, Thompson Robinson and I don't even know, Heineke I mentioned earlier, Beathard I mentioned earlier, Nate Sudfeld. I don't think Sudfeld overlapped with Shane in Philly. That might be something. Do you feel like you have to trade, whatever, a 4th or 5th round pick? I mean, that might be too much of a luxury to do, but when you're 5-1, and I think that is something that you might have to at least think about, at least ponder. And I would assume you'd want to get this done on Monday. I think you'd want the full Tuesday, get him in playbook wise. Obviously Wednesday, hit the ground running with practice. But if he's going to go on IR, and I guess for those that are interested too, you are 3 weeks from the trade deadline, so 3 weeks from Tuesday with that. Mark, he wants me to ask about the warm-up injuries. I don't understand why and how that happened. I'm guessing Ogletree wasn't paying attention or did something wrong. Looks like he ran out while Ward was taking reps. I mean, look at the replay, guys. There was like 5. I think the Colts were kicking field goals, and that was it. Of the only guys left working out. It was after the inactive list, so maybe those guys like to work out a little bit more once the field is clear. And I mean, I watch teams work out with 20, 30 dudes at a time. And, obviously you think some of that through and, hey, this is where the O-line, if you watch warm-ups, the O-linemen are usually kind of in the back right part of the end zone. The D-linemen are usually in the back left part of the end zone. Typically quarterbacks with wideouts, they get out there a little bit earlier when they have more of the field to work with there. But I know we probably all want to take and we all want something, whatever, super aggressive with this, but I just think both things are just freaky, just super, super freaky. Honestly, warm-ups, you occasionally will hear like, hey, a guy pulled a hamstring in a warm-up or, turned an ankle, and that would be, something that happens there. So last one here from Conroy. Feels that whenever the Colts run against backup quarterbacks, or whenever the Colts opponent runs a backup quarterback out there, we play like horse poop when we play backup quarterbacks. They play like Tom Brady. They've had numerous injuries on the offensive side of the ball. I think he's talking about the Cardinals, and they run Brissett out there and torch the defense. Is our defensive identity to play soft against backups? So obviously it felt very Gus Bradley-like within that game. I think when Ward goes down, I understand the chaotic nature that probably led to them playing a little bit more zone than they would have liked. Now, as the game moved along, especially Marvin Harrison Jr. goes out, do you try and play a little bit more man coverage? I will say this, credit to Arizona's pass catchers. I did think they made some really nice 50-50 plays on some balls there. But, when you look at the quarterbacks, Herbert, even Aaron Rodgers, Mahomes, you see Stroud twice, Darnold, you see there is a step up in quarterback on the schedule here moving forward. This stuff is going to be further tested. And maybe it's just simply, hey, Javarius Ward and Kenny Moore will cure all. But again, those are older guys dealing with some different injuries here. And, you've been healthy really at every level of the defense outside of that. I don't think Bynum or Cross has missed a snap. And really, we'll probably get more into this on Wednesday. I think the Colts have actually had a pretty decent bill of health through the start of the season. I know some people might be shocked by that, but the Chargers, for example, yesterday, they played an NFL game down 5 offensive starters. They didn't have their number 1, 2, 3, or 4 offensive tackle in that game. You imagine the Colts playing a game with Luke Tenuta and some dude off the streets playing tackle? I mean, that's what the Chargers had yesterday. So, and again, this is down their top 2 running backs and no Quentin Johnson. It's kind of wild that they still scored 29 points against, I don't know, Miami's at least a respectable defense. So, the Colts have had, 6 games this season. Pierce has missed 2 and Gonzalez has missed 1. Is that it from an offensive standpoint? I mean, that's I'm doing the math, right? 11 offensive starters in 6 weeks. That's, 63 of 66 guys available to you. I mean, that's a great bill of health. So, again, we'll get more into this on Wednesday, but there is a real opportunity. We'll see if the Chargers getting those tackles back. I think it sounds like there's a chance, but you got to feast. And if you watch Justin Herbert play one of the plays of the year so far in the NFL, at one point he is wrapped up with the ball in his left hand. And he turns that into a huge play, and Lab McConkey obviously helped in that play. So can't wait. I think a good barometer. And these are the types of opponents I think you're going to start to see a little bit more of here on the schedule. Last note, A.D. Mitchell was a healthy and active first time in his NFL career, so I guess you would say the punishment increased a little bit for him with Alec Pierce back healthy. They did pretty much what they have done. Pierce, Pittman play all the snaps as the outside wideouts. Ashton Doolin played 1 snap offensively. He actually got in a snap in defensively. I think the first time a team has spied Jacoby Brissett ever in NFL history. I assume the Colts had that in for Kyler Murray and just thought, hey, let's leave that in here. The 3rd and 17 snap, if you want to go back and watch it, Doolin stunts around. The running back actually picks him up pretty well. And Jacoby stepped up. Kwity Paye couldn't get home, and Jacoby delivered that big ball to, I think it was McBride, early on in that game. All right, we'll be back on Wednesday previewing the Chargers, see what the quarterback news is. Thank you for listening to this edition, Colts Corner with myself, Kevin Bowen. Everybody have a great, great week, and we'll talk to you upcoming.